Lori here. I'm here today to do a tag for you guys. I am going to try to prep film a couple of tags for September for you all because I am heading back to work and I don't know what I'm walking into, but this will be the first one that I'm going to do for you guys. This one is going to be the 90's kid book tag. I'm going to try to find out who did it because there was a specific person that wanted you to say, like, this tag was created by the Literary Phoenix. So make sure you guys go check her out, and the link to that, like her tag, will be on my blog if you guys want to go see that. But the first question is, let's see, sorry, it's on my blog. I have to go backwards. Pokemon, a G&B game and a trading card game where you battle pocket monsters and strive to catch them all. Back in the day, there were only 150 Pokemon. That has clearly changed. There's a lot more now. And a book that and the prompt they want you to do is an author you need to read every book from. For me, this one is super easy. I'm probably going to give you guys a couple answers for this. My blog will have the main one. This is Rick Riordan. Rick Riordan's main stories. So I have read the entire Percy Jackson series, entire Heroes of Olympus, the Apollo series. I've read the Norse series. I read the Egyptian series. I've read all the tie-in stuff. I love Rick Riordan. And what Rick Riordan did that I have yet to see anyone else really do was create an imprint where more diverse stories could be told. And I think Rick Riordan did that because he knew that there was so many more mythologies out there that kids needed to hear these myths from, but he was not the right person to tell that story. And I think that is like a beautiful thing. And I am just so happy with his writing style. And I'm just turned 34. But I love his books so much. I think that they're both so funny and whimsy and adventurous, but they also teach you a lot about mythology. He also has the Greek gods one, like the, more like a text, and then he also has the Greek heroes ones, and I just think he does a really, really good job. Definitely all his books are auto-buys for me, and I want to read all of his imprint novels. I tend to get approved for a lot of those on NetGalley, but if not, I will definitely buy them or get them from my library, just because there's a lot of them. But overall, I really, really love his books, and I also love the opportunities he has given to other authors, and the stories that have come out of that imprint, in addition to his own stories, are definitely some of my favorites. And then just like another one, because it's summer, I'll do my favorite contemporary author that I always buy every book from, and that is Morgan Matson. She recently came out with Take Me Home Tonight, which is like a New York City themed inspired novel, but some of my favorites for her are definitely The Unexpected Everything and Since You've Been Gone. Those are my two favorite Morgan Matsons, but every single time she comes out with a book, I buy it, I pre-order it. I've been lucky enough to meet her a couple of times, and she's really, really lovely. But her books are just perfect, quintessential summer reads that always have a strong focus on friendship, but also they do dabble in harder topics as well. And that's why she's the answer for this question. I think it's going to be a bit controversial. Sorry, friends. But the question is, let me try to find the answer. It is AIM. How 90's kids communicate with their friends after school before everyone had a cell phone. Definitely true. We did not have cell phones until much later. And then a book that connected you with your best friend. So I know that J.K. Rowling has done some disastrous things, very, very horrific comments she has made. But going back to 1999 when the series was coming out, so way back in the day, Harry Potter was how I made friends. I was very, very shy, was not very, very social. Harry Potter was a nice gateway to talk to people. And for me, that just was like, you would go up to somebody like, oh, do you read Harry Potter? Who's your favorite character? What house are you? So it was a really easy entrance point for me. And I did this until I was in college, like until the series was over. And even nowadays, like when you meet someone, this happens a lot at comic book conventions. If we're, for book conventions and we're online and we're waiting for stuff. I haven't been to a convention post all that stuff has happened. But previous to that, you would just be like, oh, what house are you? And it would just be an easy entrance point. So I have met so many friends over my life that have enjoyed Harry Potter. I have been a part of the Mugglecast, a Millennium community, which they all started their podcast when they were like 15 and 16. So 16 years later, they're still podcasting and we're still their audience. So I know that there is a lot of problems with the author, and I do see that. No one can take away what Harry Potter has meant to me, and I have to thank Harry, Ron, Hermione, and those characters for helping me find some really, really close friendships in my life. So sorry that's a little bit controversial, but that's just my take. One that I think will be sort of fun. So the next question is Furbies. Creepy nerd robots you could teach talk and were probably demon possessed. Somehow they's made a comeback. Yeah, we all remember Furbies if we were born in the 90s. A book that seemed like a good idea but was actually a monster. So this is a book that I read because of the Book Hype podcast on Hypable.com, and it's called When We Were Animals by Joshua Gaylord. Here's a photo. Literally, I was so shocked by this book because they literally chose such good books. I like them all. They were totally up my alley. This book was not it. At this point, when I was reading this like a couple of years ago, maybe like 3-4 years ago, I really never DNF books. I never did it. I had a really hard time DNFing. I still struggle with it to this day, but I've gotten a little bit better. But this book was just so weird. And I think it was meant to be sort of like a coming of age story where the kids turned into animals at night. It dealt with a lot of topics like sex and drugs. I think it was supposed to have like a Lord of the Fly element, but I hated the characters. It was paced super slowly, and it just was not captivating. I remember I trudged through this book. I think it took me like 2 weeks to read it. Does not normally happen when I read books, but boy, it just was not me. Like, it was just, we were not on the same exact page. And I never heard anyone talk about it, but this book will go down as one of my least favorite books. I think at the time, I gave it like 2 stars. If I had to rerate it, would probably be like a 1-star read because I really did not enjoy it. Did not like the characters, did not like the plot, did not like the pacing. Nothing about this book was really entertaining to me, and it just was not a book for me. Sorry for the harsh critique. Prompt is 90s quintessential boy band. You may have heard of Justin Timberlake. I was more of a Backstreet Boy fan. My cousin liked NSYNC a lot more than I did, but of course I know who they are. And the prompt is, let's see, a book you hated to say bye to. This one's super easy, and it's going to bring back Rick Riordan into the fold a little bit, but that is Blood of Olympus by Rick Riordan. Here is a photo. Like, I would say it's about like a 10-book series that really focused on these characters, and especially with Percy and Annabeth. Saying goodbye to them at the end of this book was really, really hard, but also like, so I love this series so much. I just really, really want to do a reread soon because this was definitely my favorite series of all of them because you got to see so many different characters. It also introduced Roman mythology. There was so many different point of view characters, and they were so compelling and fascinating that saying goodbye to them at the end of that book was super hard. We do see a couple of them like in in the Apollo series, but they don't have like some of them are only in like 1 or 2 books, and it's not that big of a plot point. But I just remember Snow enclosing that one book and saying, this is their goodbye. And it was really bittersweet because I had loved this series so much, but I also thought it was a really, really solid ending. And one day I hope we get more stories told from these characters' point of views. I doubt it, but it definitely is a favorite over long series for me. And I was sad to say goodbye to them because my back was bothering me. But the next prompt is slimed. If you grew up in the 90s, getting slimed on Nickelodeon was like your lifelong dream. It definitely was mine. I always wanted to get slimed, and I never did. So that's a sad state of affairs. But the prompt is a book that everybody loved, but you hated. And the book that I chose for this was Graceling by Kristen Kishore, but more about it's pretty much that whole series, the Graceling. I wanted to like this series. We read this book for the Time Warp YA Book Club. I chose it because I thought that it would be great. It was like another older YA series that I had never read. I think I liked book 1 probably the best, but book 2 and 3 just the pacing was off. I didn't feel really connected to the characters. It didn't captivate me. It was not as interesting as I wanted it to be. If I had to pick a favorite, my favorite would probably be Graceling, but this book series just did not wow me. And I had read a previous Christian Kishore book that I also didn't enjoy, so it's possible that like her writing style is just not for me. But I was so disappointed by this one because I had heard such good things and it just did not work on my end. Another one that just like I think I really need to read it physically. Like that will probably be a goal that I have to do. I think actually when I go shopping this weekend, I might pick up a copy of Six of Crows by Lee Bardugo. I listened to that series and I don't think I did it the justice that I wanted it to. So I really did not like that series, but I think it was because I listened to it and not read it. So I want to actually go back and reread that series, and I might pick up that book this weekend when I go shopping with my friends. But that's a book series that like I didn't like, but I think I need to reread it to just sort of like experience it again because since then I've read so much more. I've watched the TV show, and I feel like I would enjoy that book a lot more. But definitely Six of Crows was not my favorite the first time that I read it. It's about Oregon Trail, which is a game that they used to have you play in like high school. It was like your part of your computer programming class. We played it. I thought it was super fun. But the question is, what is a book that would make you want to die of dysentery, which is like a really really bad illness? So this book isn't like that bad, but it just has so many elements together that just was not a good reading experience for me, and that is The Glittering Court by Rochelle Mead. I do think this was more of a marketing issue because it was pitched as a fantasy novel, and I don't think it was that. I think it was more of like a historical fiction novel, which potentially in the future might have like a magic twist. But it just, the story was very, very bland. The world was not compelling. I didn't like the characters. I thought it was paced really, really weird. And at that point, I didn't really like historical fiction novels. If I go back and read it now, I wonder how I would feel. I never went back and reread the other books because at that point when I was reading it, I was really into high adult fantasy, and I was barely reading historical fiction. Now I've actually read quite a few historical fictions, and that was like a really interesting time period. It was like Prairie Land. And it reminded me a little bit of like The Selection, but it just didn't capture me enough to like keep reading, and then I never wound up continuing the series. My friend Justin loved that book, but I just didn't. So I wonder how I would feel now. If you guys would like be interested in me doing like a reading vlog featuring that book, let me know, because it's been about a couple of years since I read it, and I remember not enjoying it, but reading taste changed, so my thoughts on it may have changed. But let me know in the comments if you'd like to see me do that in the future. But that's the prompt for this one. Is mixtapes. For those that don't know, it's just like when you put a bunch of random songs on a CD and put it in your Discman or your Walkman to listen to. I definitely did make mixtapes, especially when we got like those creepy downloaded sites like Napster. I used to just download music and put them on little mixtapes. So that's what I used to do. But the question is 3 just random book recommendations, or like one that you would recommend to everybody. So the first one might be a surprise for the author because I just like did not say I like one of her books, but Vampire Academy by Rochelle Mead is one of the strongest vampire novels I've ever read. Both of the series, both Vampire Academy and Bloodlines, and I just have to give it a shout out. This book recommendation all the time to my students who say that they love Twilight because I have a lot of issues with Twilight, but I just think she crafted such a creative world and such a unique structure for vampire lore, and I loved it. I thought it was great. I thought it had a nice balance between like myth and lore, but also was very very like Twilight, it was very very dramatic. It had fun romances. Definitely a relationship I could get behind in both series, which didn't happen in Twilight. And I just thought it had really solid female characters and was about a lot more than just the romance, and I just really enjoyed it. I really hope she goes back to this world one day because it is definitely one of my favorite vampire series to date, and I will admit Twilight sort of burned that bridge for me, but between her and Cassie Clare, I have slowly come back to the vampire world. Another one is just a nonfiction book that I've read relatively recently, like a couple of years back, and it's called I Will Always Write Back. Here is a photo. This is on two kids, and it's a nonfiction read. And I don't know if your school did this, but my school had pen pals in grades. And when I was in high school, I think we had like a pen pal from another country. We did Italy because that was the language I was taking. But this one, they wound up connecting these two kids. One, I think, was from either it was Kenya or South. I can't remember where he was from, but he was from somewhere in a different continent, and then this young girl in Philadelphia, I think. And they started writing letters together, and started a friendship that transformed both of their lives, and it was so impactful seeing how much this letter mattered to this little boy named Martin, and what Caitlin was giving him was more than she ever could have imagined. And it was such a heartfelt read. It was a hard read. It was so inspiring, and it just focused on the beauty of friendship and how friendship does not just exist in in-person communication, but it also is through letters. And it just was such a heartfelt read. I think I read it twice back to back, and then I really am dying to do a reread soon. But it was just a very uplifting story about how you really can change people's lives. And I think that was just something that really, really impacted me. But yeah, so that was definitely a book that I would definitely recommend to someone who wants to read like a nonfiction book but doesn't always read nonfiction. And then my last recommendation would probably be Darkest Minds by Alexandra Bracken. Here's a photo. Book recommendation to someone who is wanting to read a little bit more dystopian or had never read dystopian really. There was a time in our lives where every book that came out was basically a dystopian novel, so sometimes they might have got left in the cracks, and this one was one that definitely is one of my favorites of all time. I didn't really love the dystopian genre. I wasn't I liked Hunger Games, but it wasn't my favorite. This book though had enough science fiction elements or fantastical elements that I really loved it. It also focused on a group of characters. The powers were really unique at that point. Now I would say like you see these powers in, Stranger Things and stuff, but at the point that this book came out, I thought it was a really unique take on it. I love the character of Ruby. I love the romance at the heart of the story. I even love like the novellas and the extension story. So yeah, I really love this series and think that if you've not checked it out, you definitely should. Check out the movie, go watch the movie. The movie was okay, but the series overall was definitely one of my favorites and had not only like a really cool like side material, but also just like the author's really, really awesome as well. And I like Alex Bracken, so definitely go check it out if you haven't done it so far. Inspired by dial-up internet. If you remember, you had to like dial up to get to your internet, and sometimes it took like a really, really long time to do that. It took like 10 to 20 minutes, and you were never on the internet for that long because then you were also blocking phone calls coming in. It was a big situation. But the prompt is, what book took you so long to read? And I actually started a book community, like a Facebook group about this, and it's called the Time Warp YA Book Club, because there was YA book series that I had never read, just because when I was not the target age. I was in like early college when these books came out, so I was very, very honed and focused on a couple of books, but there was just some series that I missed. So the one that was a little bit embarrassing was Shadow and Bone. Took me so long because I think I really would have loved this, and I still do. I think I would have loved it even more like as I was waiting for all the books to come out, because this book had so many tropes that I really liked. I don't want to spoil the tropes in this video because some of them do spoil the whole series for you. Sorry if I'm yawning. But I just love the characters in this. I love Delina. I love the world building. I love the magic system. I thought it was again really unique, and it does deal with the chosen one myth, which is one of my favorite tropes. I know people get sick of the chosen one myth, but for me, I'm still really enjoy it. But the world and the characters and the relationships really drug me in, and I'm so upset it took me so long to read it, but at least I finally have, and now I'm enjoying the TV show. I just finished Rule of Wolves, and I'm really excited to see what Leigh Bardugo writes next in this world, because she has to write something. Next prompt title is Kenan Thompson. He's the guy that's on SNL. He was on All That on Nickelodeon back in the day. He's the guy who's been on TNL forever, Mighty Ducks, Good Burgers, Kenan and Kel. That's, in everything. And the prompt is, let's see. A book that's referenced everywhere and isn't everything, but that's okay because it's awesome. And for me, it is Amari and the Night Brothers by B.B. Alston. Here's a photo. To the scene earlier this year, and I loved it. It is definitely, it's a middle grade, but it's almost like an urban middle grade story because you follow this girl named Amari. She's sort of dealing with her brother who vanished. Her brother had been admitted into this school, and she sort of gets admitted into the school thinking her brother is gone. But she realized that his school is not as normal as she predicted. It has vibes of like, Keeper of the Lost Cities or how like the Morgan Crow series. But the one thing I love about this series is it does deal with harder topics. Like it is set in our world, so it does deal with racism. It does deal with Black Lives Matter. It does deal with all of those topics, but also in a fantastical way. The plot is also super engaging. It's as complicated as the plot would be for like a Keeper of the Lost Cities book or even a Morgan Crow book, but the characters are so relatable and it was just so well done. I'm dying for book 2, but definitely a book that I've seen everywhere. I know it won the Barnes and Noble Awards. Everyone has been talking about this book, and I just think the hype is real, and you guys should all go read it. Is blasphemy in my eyes, but let's get into it. So this question is based around the Thumbs Up 7-Up game, which is a game where most class close their eyes, and 7 people tap someone on their thumb, and you had to guess who did it without peeking. We still do this in my school sometimes whenever we're not in COVID times. A book where you peek just real quick at the ending because you don't like certain guessing games. I don't think I've ever done this. I might read a book really quickly, but I never peek at the ending. And I'm bad because like I always read with a bookmark, and sometimes I spoil myself like down the page, but I've never looked at the end. The only book I know I did that with, and it was totally by accident, was Harry Potter book 6, I think. Yeah, I think it was book 6. And my cousin surprised me and brought the book at like midnight or something, and I was just trying to see how many pages the book had, and when I got to the very, very end, I misread the last line, and I thought the last line said Ron and Hermione stand over Harry's grave, which that's not what they say, but I thought it was like when I was gazing at it. So for like the whole book, I thought that Harry had died in that book, but I learned my lesson that way, and I will never ever look at the last line of a book because I don't want to know. I like the surprise. The surprise is half the fun of reading for me. Is Dunkaroos, which is basically Teddy Grahams dipping in like icing. I love Dunkaroos. I find them periodically and buy them because they are such a good snack. But what is your favorite reading snack? I will either eat fruit or I will have pretzels. So those are like my two that I go back and forth with. But I often drink just a lot of water, especially in the summer. That's my plan. But yeah, that's the snack I tend to eat. Fruit and pretzels. Sometimes if it's a really, really good book or it's like a thriller adventure, sometimes it will be potato chips, but very, very rare. And the next prompt is just about this. It's like a book that makes you stay up all night, and I think it's like the scary stories that we had when we were younger. And I don't stay up all night to read or keep you up all night. I just can't stay up past like midnight. But if I had to, or if I was motivated enough, I go to bed too early when I'm a teacher, and even in the summer, I'm still on a pretty early sleep schedule. It would probably be A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. I really like that book, and it was definitely like a page turner. And here's a photo. One that was like a murder mystery set with a podcast element to it, or like I think the second one was the podcast, but this had like a lot of like it was like she was trying to solve a case. It was very, very fast paced, very, very enjoyable. I was invested in both the characters and the mystery in this story, and I wanted to know what happened. And I am so excited to read book 3 because it's going to be out by the time this video probably goes live. But yeah, definitely if I was going to stay up late to read, it would probably be a supernatural mystery thriller or just a mystery thriller because they're super quick and fast paced. And this one is one of my favorites in recent years. This one is Bill Nye, and he is a guy that teaches you a lot of things. If you don't know who Bill Nye is, look him up. But the prompt was a book that taught you something. And I tend to read I've been getting into a lot more nonfiction recently, and especially after the COVID pandemic, I've been reading a lot more like globally. But the book that really like struck me the most that I read recently was The Threat by Andrew McCabe. Here's a photo. The reason I like this book is it also gave you a really good look at what the FBI does. And I think in the past couple of years, the FBI, we sort of got very, very conflicting reports about what FBI agents were allowed to do and what FBI agents weren't allowed to do. So I sort of liked looking at it through Andrew's eyes, but also seeing, you know, the big high profiled issues that came up throughout this. And like there was a lot of different ones that came up because he was in the um, he was in the FBI for a very, very long time, and he just left at the end of in the middle of the Trump's first term. So he had a lot of like things that he was involved in, and I just like the really like the very, very straight facts he gave you, and it really did change my thoughts on a couple of things previously. So I think reading this book and just seeing how he gave information and also like really also giving the history of the FBI was really interesting, but also how important the FBI is to our safety as a country. So very, very informative, very, very interesting. And that is the final question in this video. If you guys want to if you guys want to see me do more tags, comment below. I'll be happy to do them. And also comment below some of your answers to these questions. And I'll talk to you guys soon for my next video. Bye, friends.